You know that gut punch feeling when you realize someone you trust is stabbing you in the back? Yeah, that's where this whole story starts. My name's Ryan, and a few years ago, I thought I had life figured out. My best friend, Mark, and I co-founded a small tech company right out of college. We started in a cramped apartment with nothing but 2 laptops, a lot of caffeine, and the kind of stupid optimism only two broke 20-somethings could have. Fast forward 5 years, and we weren't just surviving, we were killing it. We had a solid list of clients, steady revenue, and a shiny office with our logo on the wall. We were finally making the kind of money that made our parents stop asking when we'd get real jobs. On paper, life was good. But as I'm about to tell you, the numbers don't always tell the truth. One late night, I stayed after hours to finish up a few invoices. Mark had already left, which wasn't unusual. He'd been taking more meetings lately, the kind where you don't bring your laptop, if you catch my drift. Anyway, while I was digging through our accounting software, something didn't add up. A payment from one of our biggest clients had cleared, but the numbers in our business account didn't match. It was off by thousands of dollars. At first, I thought it was just a typo. I mean, we weren't accountants, right? But the more I clicked around, the more I realized this wasn't a mistake. There were multiple adjustments and service fees logged under Mark's credentials. Except I knew damn well we didn't have any of those fees. It was like finding loose threads on a sweater. I kept pulling, and soon enough, the whole thing unraveled. The next morning, I came in early, logged in again, and went through months of transactions. I'm not kidding, my hands started shaking when I saw the total. Mark had been skimming money off the top of our biggest contracts, quietly siphoning profits into a consulting fee account that I had never heard of. And this wasn't recent. It had been happening for over 2 years. Now, here's where most people would confront their partner, right? Storm into their office, throw a chair, demand answers. I almost did that. I pictured flipping his desk over and screaming in his face. But something stopped me. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that losing my temper would do nothing but alert him. I remember sitting in my car that night, parked outside my apartment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just business. This was personal. Mark wasn't just a partner. He was my best friend since high school. We'd been through everything together, from late-night pizza runs to sleeping in our office during crunch time. And this guy had the nerve to rob me? I didn't sleep at all that night. But around 4 a.m., somewhere between anger and exhaustion, I had a moment of clarity. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. That's exactly what he'd expect me to do. Instead, I was going to play dumb, just like I had no clue. And while he was busy stealing from me, I'd quietly build something bigger. Something that would crush him from the inside out. The next day, I walked into the office like nothing was wrong. Mark greeted me with his usual fake grin, wearing that overpriced suit he'd definitely bought with my money. He slapped me on the back and said, "Big client meeting later. Think we'll land it?" I smiled right back and said, "Yeah, I think so." Inside, I was already planning his funeral, at least the funeral of his empire. From that moment on, every interaction I had with him became a performance. Every smile, every handshake, every late-night brainstorming session was a lie. I acted like the loyal partner while my brain was in overdrive, figuring out how to take back everything he stole, plus interest. And trust me, I wasn't just thinking small revenge. No, I was going to build something so powerful that by the time he realized what was happening, he'd be standing in the ashes of everything he thought he owned. This was the night Ryan the business partner died, and Ryan the silent predator was born. The next few weeks turned into a twisted game of pretending while I secretly went full detective. Every smile I threw at Mark in the office felt like a mask I had to glue to my face. On the surface, I was still his loyal business partner, the guy who trusted him with every decision. But behind the scenes, I was digging into every dark corner of our company, determined to find out just how deep his betrayal went. The first step was simple: gather evidence. I started downloading every financial statement, every invoice, and every email thread from the past 3 years. Late at night, after Mark had gone home or was out schmoozing clients, I'd stay in the office, working late. In reality, I was copying files onto an encrypted hard drive I kept hidden in my car. Every time I uncovered another fake expense or shady consulting fee, I felt both sick and more determined than ever. What I found was worse than I imagined. Mark wasn't just skimming a few thousand here and there. He'd created an entire fake shell company under a generic name, and he was funneling at least 30% of our biggest deals into that account. It was genius, in a sick way. He'd write off the stolen money as third-party services, make up fake invoices, and then pay himself through this shell company. And I'd signed off on most of those deals without a second thought. I can't describe the rage that bubbled inside me when I realized just how thoroughly he'd played me. It wasn't just greed. It was betrayal on a level I couldn't wrap my head around. I thought about confronting him 100 times, but I kept reminding myself, if you blow this now, he'll just cover his tracks and walk away with everything. So instead, I kept smiling, playing the clueless co-founder. I even started acting a little dumber than usual, pretending I didn't really understand the financial side of things. The more I let him think I wasn't paying attention, the bolder he became. It was like giving him rope to hang himself, and he was happily wrapping it around his own neck. But I didn't just want to catch him. I wanted to ruin him. And for that, I needed a plan. I started researching everything I could about company law, accounting fraud, and business takeovers. I wasn't about to let my emotions drive this. I was going to be smart, calculated, and patient. If I played this right, I could not only expose him but also take every client, every asset, and leave him with nothing. One of the first moves I made was reaching out to a friend from college, Jen, who worked in forensic accounting. Over a few beers, I casually asked her hypothetical questions about embezzlement and tax fraud. You know, just out of curiosity. She saw right through me and said, "Ryan, what's going on?" I hesitated but ended up telling her the truth. Well, most of it. Jen's advice was gold. You need to build a timeline and gather every single piece of evidence, she told me. Don't confront him, don't tip him off. And for God's sake, don't let him know you're looking at the books. With her help, I started organizing everything. Spreadsheets, emails, bank statements, fake invoices, all of it. I had a digital folder I called insurance, and every day it grew thicker. If Mark ever tried to screw me over officially, I'd have enough dirt to bury him 10 times over. But collecting evidence wasn't enough. I needed to start planning my exit and my revenge. So I started paying attention to our clients in a way I never had before. Every time I met with them, I'd casually drop hints that I was exploring new ideas or thinking about branching out. I didn't pitch anything yet. I just planted seeds. Meanwhile, I started keeping a journal of everything Mark said or did that seemed suspicious. Every weird phone call he took behind closed doors, every business expense that didn't make sense, every time he conveniently forgot to tell me about a client meeting. I was building a case, but I was also building a profile of the man I used to call my best friend. And the more I learned, the more I realized I didn't even know who Mark really was anymore. The final straw came when I found out he'd tried to negotiate a side deal with one of our biggest clients, cutting me out completely. He was basically trying to steal the business out from under me. That's when I knew this wasn't just about catching him. It was about taking everything back and making sure he couldn't hurt me or anyone else ever again. I remember looking at myself in the mirror one night, exhausted, dark circles under my eyes from weeks of late-night digging, and saying out loud, "I'm going to destroy him. Quietly. Completely. And he's never going to see it coming." That's when the real plan started forming. It wouldn't be fast. It wouldn't be easy. But when I was done, Mark would wish he'd never tried to screw me over. The day I decided to start my own company was the day my mindset shifted from survival to attack. Up until then, I'd been playing defense, collecting proof, and keeping my head down. But now I wanted to build something so strong, so bulletproof, that when Mark's empire collapsed, mine would be standing taller than ever. The trick was to keep him completely in the dark. If he even sniffed that I was planning something, he'd panic, burn bridges, or worse, try to sabotage me first. So, I had to make every move look like nothing more than a side hobby. I started small. I registered a new LLC under a generic name that had no connection to me or our current company. The name sounded like something random you'd find on a business card. Nothing flashy, nothing memorable. Just enough to be invisible. I used a P.O. box instead of my home address, set up a separate business bank account, and bought a cheap second phone to keep all communications separate. It felt sneaky, like I was living a double life, and I kind of was. The next step was building a foundation. Our clients loved me, not to brag, but I was the guy they called when they wanted results. Mark was more of the flashy face of the business, but I was the one who actually got stuff done. So I started planting seeds during client meetings. Little comments like, "We've been thinking about expanding into some new services," or "I'm exploring a few side projects on my own time." Nothing too obvious, just enough to make them curious. At the same time, I started reaching out to key suppliers. I framed it as hypothetical. If someone wanted to start fresh, would you still offer the same rates? Most of them said yes instantly. Turns out, loyalty in business often follows the person who delivers results, not the company logo. Meanwhile, I kept my day job with Mark running like normal. I was still showing up to meetings, still signing off on projects, still laughing at his dumb jokes. Even though every time I looked at him, I wanted to smash his smug face into the conference table. He had no idea that while he was busy siphoning money, I was laying the foundation to take everything that made him rich. One of my smartest moves was pulling together a quiet dream team. I'd identified the 3 best employees in our company, the people who actually made things work behind the scenes. I knew Mark didn't value them like I did, so I started building trust with them outside of work. Casual coffee chats turned into deeper conversations about where they saw their careers going. "Look," I told one of them, a brilliant developer named Kevin, "I've been thinking about the future. If I were to start something new, I'd want you on my team, with equity, not just a paycheck. Something where you'd actually own a piece of what you build." Kevin's eyes lit up. "Are you serious?" "Because I'd quit tomorrow if I had that kind of opportunity." Bingo. Over the next month, I quietly had similar conversations with the other key employees. I wasn't asking them to jump ship yet, just getting them interested. By the end of those talks, I had 3 quiet allies ready to join me the second I gave the green light. But the best part? Mark had no idea. He was too busy thinking he was the smartest guy in the room. He'd started bragging about a big expansion plan he was cooking up, one that would make us millionaires in a year. I smiled and nodded, all while funneling my energy into my own project. The first time I transferred a client from our company to my new LLC, I almost had a panic attack. I didn't do it openly, of course. I offered the client consulting services on the side, something just between us, and for a cheaper rate than what our company charged. It was a small contract, nothing Mark would notice. But when that first payment hit my new bank account, I knew I'd crossed a line. There was no turning back. Each week, I pulled more strings. Another client here, a supplier agreement there. I never did anything that would tank the old company too fast. I needed Mark to stay blind while I built my foundation. But every move I made brought me closer to independence, and every dollar I earned on the side felt like taking back what he stole. There were nights I barely slept, bouncing between working on Mark's projects by day and building my new empire by night. My apartment looked like a war room, sticky notes on the walls, whiteboards covered in timelines, and a laptop that never closed. I wasn't just building a business. I was building a weapon, and soon, I'd be ready to use it. By the time my new company had its foundation solid, I was done just playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. Mark thought he was untouchable, the golden boy who had everything under control. But the truth? He had no clue I was about to pull every string he thought he was holding. I realized early on that the best way to destroy Mark wasn't to attack him directly, but to let him sabotage himself. He was cocky, greedy, and reckless, the perfect combination for self-destruction if nudged in the right direction. So, I decided to become his biggest supporter, feeding him bad advice and subtle misinformation that would slowly sink the company. It started small. Mark loved chasing big fish clients, the kind of flashy accounts that looked amazing on paper but were logistical nightmares. Normally, I try to talk him out of them because they often drained more resources than they brought in. But now, I encouraged him. "Dude, that's genius." I'd say when he mentioned some half-baked idea to land a massive client with ridiculous demands. "We can totally handle it. You should go all in on this one." He lit up like a kid on Christmas morning, never realizing I was just pointing him straight into a storm. The first of these deals was a high-maintenance client that wanted insane customization on their project, something that would eat up all our time and leave our smaller, steady clients neglected. I watched as Mark poured resources into this deal, draining our team while my secret company quietly scooped up the smaller clients he ignored. Then I started planting fake opportunities. I'd casually mention a hot lead I'd heard about through my contacts, which was really just a dead-end company I knew would waste his time. I'd even set up fake email conversations, forwarding them to him like I was helping out. He'd get excited, chase the lead for weeks, and come back frustrated when it fizzled. I'd pat him on the back and say, "Hey, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?" The beauty of it was that Mark never suspected me. If anything, he started to rely on me more, thinking I was the one really looking out for him. He'd ask for my expert opinion on deals, and I'd steer him right into traps. Meanwhile, I continued building my new company in the shadows. Every time Mark fumbled a deal or upset a client, I'd quietly reach out to that client with a personal offer, pitching my new company's services at a better price and with better support. I can't even describe the thrill of watching them switch over, one by one, while Mark had no idea why the old company's numbers were slipping. But I didn't stop there. I also started manipulating our internal workflow. Whenever Mark insisted on pushing a certain project, I'd assign our best employees to urgent tasks that I knew wouldn't yield results. This left him scrambling when deadlines loomed. He started to think the team was slacking, which only caused more tension between him and the staff. I was turning him into the bad guy while I stayed the helpful partner everyone trusted. To add to the chaos, I set up a few small but noticeable mistakes in our accounting system. Nothing illegal, just enough to make the numbers look worse than they were. Whenever Mark noticed, I'd act concerned. "Man, I don't know what's going on. Maybe we should double-check with the accountant?" He'd sigh, convinced that our financial struggles were just bad luck or market downturns. And Mark's ego? It was eating all of this up. He started taking bigger risks to save the company, throwing money at marketing campaigns that went nowhere. I subtly encouraged these moves, saying things like, "If anyone can turn this around, it's you." He believed it, because Mark always needed to be the smartest guy in the room. The more he chased impossible deals and wasted resources, the more cracks appeared in his empire. I was there for every one of them, pretending to be the loyal co-founder while I secretly celebrated each disaster he walked into. By this point, I wasn't just running two companies. I was running a psychological game. Mark thought he was leading us to success, but in reality, I was the one holding all the strings. And the best part? He had no clue. Every time I looked at him across the conference table, smiling like the world was his, I couldn't help but think, "You have no idea I'm the one loading the bullets into your own gun." By this point, my secret company was standing on solid ground. I had a few clients, steady income, and a growing sense of power that Mark couldn't touch. But if I really wanted to bring him down, I needed more than just clients. I needed people. Specifically, the kind of people who kept our old company running while Mark strutted around taking all the credit. I knew exactly who I wanted. The three employees who were the backbone of everything. Kevin, our lead developer, was a genius with code. Sarah, our operations manager, kept the company from falling apart daily. And Maria, our project coordinator, had connections with every client and supplier we worked with. Mark barely noticed them, treating them like replaceable cogs. But I knew better. Without them, the whole machine would stop. The challenge was pulling them over without tipping off Mark. I couldn't just walk up to them and say, "Hey, want to ditch this sinking ship?" I needed to build trust slowly, make them feel like they were choosing a better future, not betraying anyone. I started with Kevin. We'd been friends for a while, bonding over late-night coding sessions and trash-talking bad software. One night, I invited him out for beers under the excuse of blowing off steam. "Kev," I said, leaning back in my chair, "you ever feel like we're just making someone else rich?" He smirked. "You mean Mark?" I laughed, but didn't confirm it. "I mean, look, we kill ourselves to get these projects perfect. You're basically the engine that keeps everything running. And what do you get? A paycheck. Meanwhile, Mark's out there buying his third Rolex." Kevin rolled his eyes. "Don't even get me started. I've been thinking about leaving for a while, man. But where would I go? Every company is the same." I grinned. "Not every company. What if there was a place where the people who actually built the success got a real piece of the pie? Equity, ownership, the chance to actually build something for themselves instead of some dude's ego." His eyebrows shot up. "Are you serious?" I just nodded. "Let's just say, if I ever went off and started something new, I'd want you leading the charge. Not as an employee, as a partner." Kevin stared at me for a long moment, then raised his glass. "You let me know when that day comes, Ryan. I'm in." Bingo. Next was Sarah. Sarah was tough, smart, sharp, and loyal, but even she was starting to crack under Mark's nonsense. He constantly dumped impossible workloads on her and then blamed her when things went wrong. I took her out for coffee one morning and casually asked how she was holding up. She sighed. Honestly, I'm exhausted. It's like I'm managing two companies, ours and Mark's ego. I chuckled. You're not wrong. You've basically been running the show for months. If you weren't here, we'd be screwed. Don't I know it? She muttered, half joking, half serious. That was my opening. Sarah, what if you could be in a place where you didn't just keep the company running? You were the company? Where your work wasn't just appreciated, but rewarded? She tilted her head, suspicious but interested. What are you saying? I leaned in slightly. I'm saying I have plans. Big plans. And when the time comes, I want people I can trust by my side. People who deserve better than this circus. Sarah smiled faintly. You're saying I should keep my schedule open? I grinned. I'm saying if I call you one day, you won't regret picking up. Lastly, Maria. Maria was the glue between us and the clients. She heard all the gossip, all the frustrations, all the backroom chatter. And she was fed up. Mark had yelled at her one too many times over a client mix-up that wasn't even her fault. One Friday evening, I caught her just as she was packing up. Rough week? I asked. She gave me a look like I'd just asked if the sky was blue. Understatement of the year. Mark's driving everyone crazy. Half our clients hate working with him, but I'm the one who has to smooth it over. I shrugged. Then maybe it's time you worked somewhere that actually valued that skill. Somewhere with leadership that isn't a complete idiot. She laughed. I'd pay to see that. I smirked. What if you didn't have to pay? What if I told you I was building something better? Maria paused. You're not joking, are you? Not even a little, I said. And when the time comes, I want you to run client relations for me. With a pay raise. And real respect. Her grin told me everything I needed to know. By the end of that week, I had my dream team quietly committed. I didn't need contracts or signatures. I had their trust, and that was worth more than any paperwork. When I gave the word, they'd walk out of Mark's company and straight into mine. Mark, of course, had no clue. He still strutted around like king of the castle, completely oblivious that his castle was crumbling from the inside. And I was the one pulling every brick out, one by one. With my dream team quietly on standby, it was time to take my new company from a side hustle to a full-fledged operation. The old company was still running, but it was starting to creak under Mark's bad decisions and inflated ego. Every mistake he made, every client he irritated, was an opportunity for me to swoop in and offer something better. And I did, over and over again. At first, I played it safe, picking up smaller clients who wouldn't raise any suspicion. I'd offer them consulting services through my new company, pitching it as something independent from our main business, just a side project I was doing on weekends. Most of them didn't care what the name on the invoice was. They just wanted good results, and I delivered. But once I realized how easy it was to get them on board, I got bolder. I started targeting our mid-tier clients, the ones Mark always took for granted. He'd treat them like second-class accounts, too busy chasing flashy, prestige deals to give them any real attention. I gave them all the attention they could ever want. I'd call them personally, walk them through solutions, even fix issues Mark's team had left unresolved. It wasn't long before they started asking me, why can't your company just handle everything? That was my in. You know, I'd say casually, I do have a separate operation that can give you a better rate and faster turnaround. Totally up to you, but I'd be happy to send you the details. 9 times out of 10, they said yes. The first time one of our major clients fully jumped ship to my new company, I felt this insane rush, part excitement, part guilt. But the guilt didn't last long. I kept thinking about all the money Mark had stolen from me, all the lies he told, and I realized this wasn't just revenge, it was justice. By this point, my apartment had transformed into a command center. I had 2 laptops running side by side, one for the old company's projects, one for my new empire. The whiteboard in my living room was covered with timelines, client lists, and strategy notes. My phone never stopped buzzing, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt alive. I was finally in control. Mark, of course, had no idea. He thought the dip in our old company's numbers was just market conditions or bad luck. I played along, even suggesting we cut some costs to weather the storm. He agreed, and that gave me even more leverage. When he reduced budgets for client support, I swooped in with my new company and offered the same services at full strength. Clients didn't hesitate. They were tired of his incompetence. Meanwhile, I started making quiet moves with my team. Kevin began helping me on the side, developing new tools and software for our new business. Sarah, still managing operations at the old company, was feeding me insider info on upcoming contracts and client frustrations. And Maria? She was my secret weapon. She had personal relationships with all our top accounts, and every time Mark messed up, she'd call me and say, "It's a good time to reach out to them." Within 3 months, my new company was making almost as much money as the old one. And the best part? I hadn't even launched it publicly. No big announcement, no marketing campaign, just word of mouth and my reputation doing all the work. I remember one night, sitting in my apartment, looking at the numbers, and realizing I had officially outgrown the company Mark and I had built together. My new business was leaner, faster, and 10 times more efficient. Everything he took from me, I had taken back, and then some. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The next phase of my plan was about positioning myself as the only option for our old clients. I started strategically timing the transfer of accounts. If a client's contract with the old company was about to expire, I'd step in with an unbeatable offer through my new business. I'd throw in extra perks, personalized service, anything to make them feel valued. And every time, they'd jump ship without looking back. Mark, meanwhile, was completely oblivious. He was too busy trying to land some huge deal with a corporate giant, something I knew would never work out. I actually encouraged him to go all in on that, telling him, "Man, if we land this, we'll be set for years." In reality, I knew it would drain his last resources and keep him distracted while I cleaned out the rest of our client base. By the end of that quarter, my new company wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. I had a loyal team, a growing client list, and enough revenue to start thinking about expansion. The old company? It was on life support, and Mark still thought he was in control. By the time spring rolled around, the old company looked like a ship taking on water. Every week, the numbers dipped lower. Clients were leaving quietly, some for budget reasons, others because they were tired of Mark's arrogant attitude. Of course, what he didn't know was that half of them were now happily working with me, getting better service at better rates. Mark was starting to crack. I could see it in the way he slammed his office door or barked at employees over the smallest mistakes. He started spending more time pacing the office than actually working. I knew him well enough to realize that this was when he made his worst decisions, when his ego told him he needed a big win to prove he was still the guy in charge. I decided to give him just enough rope to hang himself. One morning, I casually dropped by his office with a folder. "Hey, I've been looking into some new leads. There's this potential contract with a major retailer. It's high risk, but if it lands, it could be big for us." Mark's eyes lit up instantly. "How big?" I shrugged, playing it cool. "Huge. Multi-year. But they're notorious for eating companies alive with demands. We'd have to throw everything we've got into it." He didn't even hesitate. "Let's do it. We need a win. Set up a pitch meeting." Perfect. I knew this retailer's reputation. They'd chew up all our resources for months and then cancel the contract when they got what they wanted. I even had a contact inside the company feeding me info. I set up the pitch, fully knowing it was a trap. In the meantime, I kept tightening the screws on the old company. I started accidentally missing minor deadlines or sending Mark incomplete reports, making it look like the staff was overworked. When he asked why things were slipping, I'd say, "We just need more hands on deck. Maybe if we hire more contractors," knowing full well we couldn't afford it. The tension in the office was like static in the air. Employees were whispering in break rooms, some even asking me privately if the company was in trouble. I played the loyal co-founder role to perfection. "Don't worry, guys. We're just going through a rough patch. Mark has a plan." Oh, he had a plan all right. One that I fed him, step by step, and each step pushed him closer to disaster. The breaking point came with the big contract. Mark poured money into the pitch, new marketing materials, expensive consultants, even a flashy ad campaign that made no sense. I acted like I was supporting him the whole way. "You're a visionary, man," I told him, even though I knew he was digging his own grave. We didn't land the contract. When the retailer ghosted us after months of consideration, Mark lost it. He stormed through the office, yelling about incompetence, and how no one cared as much as he did. Half the staff was ready to quit on the spot. I stepped in, pretending to calm things down, while secretly texting Sarah, "Start getting your resume ready for the switch. It's almost time." The finances were in freefall. Mark had taken out personal loans to keep the company afloat, thinking this big deal would save us. Instead, he was deeper in debt than ever. Creditors started calling, and I made sure to forget to pass him some of the messages until it was too late. Meanwhile, my new company was thriving. I'd just landed a contract with a client that Mark had neglected for months. When I saw the numbers side by side, his company barely scraping by while mine was booming, I knew it was almost time to end this game. Mark, desperate to turn things around, started suggesting we dip into our personal savings. He even asked me to take a second mortgage on my apartment. I just shook my head and said, "Man, I'm already stretched thin. We just have to weather this storm." Little did he know, I was the storm. By the end of that quarter, the old company was on life support. Mark looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He was snapping at everyone, including clients, which only drove them further away. He still didn't suspect me. He thought we were both drowning together, never realizing that I'd already built a life raft, and I was watching him sink. The next step was simple. When he finally hit rock bottom, I'd pull every last client, every employee, and leave him standing in the ruins. And that moment was closer than he could ever imagine. By the time summer rolled around, Mark's company was hanging by a thread. I could see it in his face every morning. Dark circles under his eyes, that desperate grin he tried to fake when clients came in, the way he avoided checking the bank statements for too long. He was on the verge of breaking, and I was ready to finish what I started. The first step in my final move was timing. I had to strike when the company was weakest, but before Mark realized what was happening. That meant aligning everything, clients, employees, contracts, so that when I pulled the trigger, the entire structure would collapse overnight. I started with the team. I met with Kevin, Sarah, and Maria outside of work, away from prying eyes. We sat in a quiet corner of a bar, and I laid out the plan. "By the end of this quarter, I'm shutting the door on this place," I said, keeping my voice low. "I've got everything ready, clients lined up, new offices, better salaries for all of you. When the time comes, I'm pulling the plug. You in?" Kevin didn't even hesitate. "Man, I've been ready for this since you first hinted at it. I'm sick of fixing Mark's messes." Sarah nodded. "I can't keep doing all the work while he takes the credit. Count me in." Maria smirked. "If I get to call the clients and tell them we've got something better? Oh, I'm definitely in." We clinked glasses, and just like that, the inner circle was locked and loaded. Next, I focused on the clients. Every contract we had was either up for renewal or due for review. I made sure to personally reach out to every single client I wanted to keep, offering them deals they couldn't refuse through my new company. Most of them were thrilled to jump ship. After all, I was the one they trusted anyway, not Mark. To avoid suspicion, I staggered the client moves. One week, I'd consult on a project under my company's name. The next week, I'd propose a long-term contract just to keep things simple. One by one, they slid out of Mark's hands and into mine. By mid-month, I had nearly all the major clients on my side. That's when I made my boldest move. I signed the lease on our old office space. It was poetic. Mark had been struggling to pay the rent, and the landlord was ready to kick him out. I swooped in with my new company name and signed a fresh lease. The thought of him walking into his building and seeing my logo on the door? Yeah, I won't lie, that made me grin. Meanwhile, I kept feeding Mark just enough false hope to keep him distracted. I'd tell him I was working on new leads, or maybe this next quarter will be the turnaround. He bought it because he needed to believe it. The day I knew I had him was when he called me late at night, panic in his voice. "Ryan, I think we're screwed. I've maxed out my credit cards. I can't make payroll next month unless we get a miracle." I stayed calm. "Don't worry, man. We'll figure something out. Maybe call a meeting tomorrow and we'll brainstorm." That meeting was my final setup. I told him we needed to streamline operations and that some clients might be pulling back. He agreed to cut staff hours and delay payments to suppliers, thinking it would help cash flow. In reality, all it did was push more clients toward me when they saw the old company falling apart. By the end of that week, the transition was complete. Every single major client had signed on with my company. My team had quietly given notice. Sarah, Kevin, and Maria all left on the same day, walking straight from Mark's office into mine. When I got the keys to the office, our office now, I stood there for a minute, soaking it all in. The place we built together was no longer his. It was mine. Every chair, every desk, every ounce of sweat we'd poured into that business. I'd taken it all back. Mark? He had no idea what hit him yet. But that was about to change. The stage was set. The trap was ready. And in just a few days, I'd confront him face to face and show him exactly how I'd turned his empire into rubble. I'll never forget the look on Mark's face the day it all came crashing down. It was a Tuesday morning, right after our former landlord called him to let him know the office lease had officially been transferred. Not just to someone else, but to me. He burst into my apartment an hour later, looking like a man who'd just seen a ghost. His shirt was wrinkled, hair uncombed, and he was clutching a printed copy of the lease agreement like it was evidence in a murder trial. "You," he growled. "You took the office?" I stood there calmly, coffee in hand. "Yeah, I figured it was time for a fresh start." His face turned bright red. "Are you kidding me, Ryan? You went behind my back and bought our office out from under me?" I sipped my coffee. "Technically, I didn't buy it. I just signed a lease. You were behind on payments, remember?" He stepped closer, shaking with rage. "You've been stealing my clients." Now that was rich. I chuckled. "Your clients? The ones you neglected for months? The ones you overcharged and underdelivered to?" "No, Mark. I didn't steal them. I saved them." He was shaking his head, pacing my living room like a caged animal. "This is insane. You can't just take everything. What about the company?" I set my cup down and looked him in the eyes for the first time in months. Not the fake eye contact I gave him in meetings, but the real kind. Cold. Honest. "There is no company, Mark," I said slowly. "It's done. You just didn't realize it." He froze. "What do you mean?" "You've got no staff," I continued. "Sarah, Kevin, Maria, they're all with me now. You've got no clients. They're under new contracts with my company. You've got no office. No cash flow. No future." Mark's mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. "You think I didn't know what you were doing all these years?" I asked, stepping closer. "You thought I was stupid, that I'd never catch the consulting fees, the double invoices, the secret account. But I saw it all, and instead of confronting you, I decided to let you dig your own grave." He finally found his voice. "You've been planning this?" "For over a year," I said. "Every mistake, every missed client call, every fake lead, I gave it to you. You were too arrogant to question anything. You played yourself, Mark." His legs gave out, and he collapsed into the chair across from me. I was just trying to keep us afloat. I needed extra cash. I didn't think." "No," I interrupted. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You betrayed me, the company, the team, and I didn't forget that. I just waited." There was a long silence. He stared at the floor, completely hollow. "I trusted you," he finally whispered. "No," I said, standing tall. "I trusted you, and you threw that away. So now, I'm doing what you never could, building something real, something honest, without you." He looked up at me, and for the first time in our entire friendship, I saw it. Defeat. Not anger, not defiance, just pure, soul-deep loss. I walked to the door and opened it. "We're done, Mark." He stood up slowly, like his body weighed 100 pounds more than it did. He walked to the door, paused for a second, then turned back. "You planned all this, and never said a word." "That's why it worked," I said flatly. And with that, he walked out. No yelling, no threats, just silence. The same silence I'd kept for over a year. The silence that let me tear down his empire, brick by brick, while he watched it crumble without ever knowing where the cracks began. It was finally over. A week after Mark walked out of my apartment for the last time, the silence that followed hit different. Not the tense kind I'd been living in for over a year, the kind filled with secrets and quiet plotting. This was peace. No more lies. No more pretending. The fallout happened fast. Mark tried to salvage what he could, but it was like trying to scoop water with a net. Clients had already moved on. The staff was gone. The landlord had rebranded the building with my company's name, and the business accounts were bone dry. He sent me one final email. No subject line, just one sentence. "I hope it was worth it." I didn't respond, because it wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about regaining control of my life. About reclaiming something that was mine from the start. The truth is, I didn't celebrate right away. I worked. I built. I poured everything I had into the new company, not out of spite, but out of purpose. My team, was thriving. Kevin launched a new internal platform that streamlined our services and blew clients away. Sarah built an ops system so efficient, we could scale without chaos. Maria? She didn't just keep our clients happy, she turned them into evangelists. I paid them well, gave them ownership. I wanted them to feel like this was theirs too, because it was. Within 6 months, we doubled the revenue of the old company's best year. And something wild started happening. Competitors started reaching out, asking if we wanted to merge or collaborate. People who used to ignore our cold emails were suddenly asking for meetings. We were no longer underdogs. We were a force. But for me, the real win was internal. I was no longer stuck in a toxic partnership, second-guessing every decision. I no longer had to play small to protect someone else's ego. I woke up every morning with a clear head, excited to work with people I respected, building something we all believed in. And yeah, sometimes I thought about Mark. I heard through the grapevine that he tried to start something new, but it never took off. The industry didn't forget how he treated people. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything online about what happened. No victory lap. Just kept building. One day, about a year later, I walked into my office, early, before anyone else arrived. The sun was coming in through the windows, painting everything in gold. I stood there for a moment, just soaking it all in. This was mine. Not because I took it, but because I earned it. And that's when it hit me. The best revenge wasn't the trap I set. It wasn't the confrontation. It was this. Success, peace, purpose, living the life I built, while he watched from the outside, knowing he could have had it too, if only he hadn't tried to steal it. That's what made it poetic. I didn't just destroy what he built. I replaced it with something better, something real. And I did it without screaming, without lawsuits, without drama. I did it silently, just like he stole from me. But unlike him, I didn't burn it to the ground. I grew. The end. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Did he do the right thing?